Okay, hi guys. It's Sarah Reynolds, your favorite progressive patriot, and welcome to day 29 in our series, A Year in the Life of the Progressive Patriot. And yes, I am in Nathan Hale Park for a Saturday Sarah story on a Sunday, kind of like last week, except I'm not on the bench because there was someone sitting on the bench. So I thought I could go up to him and be like, hey, I see we're feeling patriotic. That's my bench. And then I thought, okay, it's not really my bench. So you can see right over here, you can see the quote, the Nathan Hale quote, and his birthday, 1755, and death year, 1776. And his quote, I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. Yeah, remember, you gotta die for something, so might as well be freedom from tyranny. So, I'm back in Nathan Hale Park for a story from my past, something interesting and fun. And people keep walking by because it is a park at the corner of a very, or semi-busy intersection. And then they'll like wave at me. And I'll, yeah, so if that happens and I wave at someone, it's because they're waving at me first. Okay, so this is what happened. Now, remember that the original story was probably about May of '87 during an episode of Saturday Night Live that my mom brought me to the park. Okay, so over the years she would reinforce, with various examples, how lucky we were to not live in a fascist regime, and that people were happy to die for our freedom, not for their freedom because they knew they were going to lose their lives, but for the future generation's freedom from tyranny. So she would always say, things could be worse. It could be whatever under a fascist regime. And you know how people say it could be worse, it could be raining? Well, she would say it could be worse, it could be raining under a fascist regime. So she would say this all the time, and she would also always put into perspective the difference between cost and price, and especially the difference between the cost and the price of freedom. And so whenever we would go into a store, she would show me an object, and let's say it was, $1.99, $1.99, she would say, it probably cost about 50 cents. And then this store is making, $1.49, and then at the end of the year, of course my mom was a small business owner, so she was putting this in perspective. At the end of the year, did they make the full $1.49? No, because there was the cost of the employees, the cost of the lights, the cost of the heat of the building, all of these things, the landlord's rent for the usage of the building for the shop. So she would explain all that. And so there's the cost, and then there's the price. And then she would explain that with freedom, it's a little different. With freedom, the cost is actually higher than the price. And she wouldn't explain exactly how that was for a few years. She wanted me to figure it out. So I will let you figure it out. No, I'm kidding. At the end of the video, I'll explain. So here's the story. So one day I come home from school, probably second grade. I come home from school. It's a dark winter night. It's very cold. Hi! And the kids are so cute. Okay, let's try that again with no kids walking by. Okay, so I come home from school. It's cold, it's snowing, it's awful, it's about to be dark because it gets dark so early in the winter. So my mom says, Sarah, I want you to run to the post office for me and grab me some stamps, but you gotta go now because it's going to close and it's about a mile walk there. And I was like, a mile? A mile? And that means it's 2 miles. If it's a mile there, it's a whole 2 miles. I must have been 8, okay? So she says, because this was before the fall of the Berlin Wall, because we were calling Russia the Soviet Union at the time. So she says to me, well, you're going to have to go quick because, yeah, it's going to be dark. But Mom, it's freezing cold outside, it's snowing. Well, you better bundle up. But I'm hungry, we can eat when you get home. But it's 2 miles. Sarah, Louise Reynolds, you could have to walk 2 miles, hungry, in the snow, and freezing cold, under a fascist regime. How would you like to have to walk 2 miles in the snow, hungry, under a fascist regime? And I'm like, uh-oh, here it comes. It's happening again. She said fascist regime. So she says, Sarah, you need to be thankful. And I want you to walk that whole 2 miles thinking about how thankful you are that you don't live under a fascist regime and that you don't live in a country where they execute journalists just to make a point and execute publicly people who protested the injustice of the government just to show that this is what happens if you protest injustice. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be thankful. I'm going to be thankful. So then here it comes. Sarah, what would Nathan Hale say to his mom if she said, honey, I want you to run down to the post office for me and get me some stamps before it closes? If I go, he'd say, I'm happy to die. And she's like, okay, no, not for stamps. So my mom's going, oh my God, I programmed her just a little too well. So we had to have a real quick recap that yes, certain things we are happy to die for, like freedom, but for stamps, you know, you're just thinking in general terms of gratitude that you don't live under a fascist regime. So the whole time I'm walking, you know, freezing cold, my hands are freezing in my mittens, and I'm like, okay, I could have to live in communist China or fascist Soviet Union. It was great. Little story, definitely put things into perspective. My whole life I would always think in terms of being grateful, and I highly recommend that you do the same, because no matter what bad thing is happening, it could be worse. It could be happening under fascist regime. Alright, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night.